Right now, as you watch this video, someone is watching you. Not through hidden cameras or spy devices, but through something far more intimate and devastating, your own emotional behavior. You believe you're free, that your romantic choices are yours, that when you fall in love, it's because you decided to. But what if I told you that you're just a rat desperately running through a maze built by other people? What if every move you make, every sigh of desire, every accelerated heartbeat when you see that special person is nothing more than a conditioned response to an emotional surveillance system you don't even realize exists? Michel Foucault, one of the most disturbing thinkers of the 20th century, dedicated his life to unmasking the invisible mechanisms of control that shape our existence. He wasn't just talking about physical prisons or authoritarian governments. Foucault revealed something far darker. We live in a disciplinary society where power doesn't need bars or shackles to control us. Modern power is subtle. It penetrates. Our soul shapes our most intimate desires and convinces us we're free while keeping us perfectly domesticated. Power is not something that is possessed. It is something that is exercised, Foucault said. And when we apply this perspective to love and relationships, we discover a terrifying truth. You don't choose who you fall in love with. You're programmed to do it. There's an emotional panopticon watching your every move, recording your vulnerabilities, mapping your desires, and using that information to keep you exactly where they want you. The panopticon was a prison idealized by philosopher Jeremy Bentham, where a single guard could observe all prisoners without them knowing whether they were being watched or not. Foucault transformed this idea into a powerful metaphor for our society. We live as if we're always being observed, and this constant possibility of surveillance makes us watch ourselves. We internalize control. We become our own guards. But here's what Foucault didn't fully anticipate. In the digital age, this panopticon has become emotional. Every swipe on dating apps, every like on social media, every message you send or don't send is being recorded, analyzed, and used to create a psychological profile so detailed it knows you better than you know yourself. The algorithms don't just predict what you want to buy. They predict who you want to love, and more importantly, they shape that desire before you even feel it. Think about it. When was the last time you fell in love with someone completely unexpected? Someone who didn't fit the pattern of your previous relationships? Someone who challenged your aesthetic preferences, your social class, your political views? The answer is probably never, because the system has been training you since childhood to desire only what serves its purposes. The body is the inscribed surface of events, Foucault observed, and your body has been inscribed with desires that aren't your own. This is where the true horror begins. You think you're choosing your partner based on chemistry, attraction, compatibility, but what you call chemistry is actually the result of years of conditioning. What you call attraction has been manufactured by media, advertising, and social pressure. What you call compatibility is simply the recognition of patterns that have been implanted in your unconscious mind. You're not falling in love. You're following a script written by forces you can't see. The dating apps are the most obvious example of this emotional surveillance. They don't just show you potential matches, they create your preferences. Every profile you swipe left or right is data being fed into an algorithm that's learning to manipulate your desires. The app doesn't want to find you the perfect person. It wants to keep you swiping, keep you engaged, keep you producing data. Your loneliness is their profit. Your romantic frustration is their success metric. But the surveillance goes deeper than apps. It's embedded in every romantic movie you've ever watched, every love song you've ever heard, every story you've been told about what love should look like. These aren't innocent entertainment, they're disciplinary mechanisms. They teach you how to love, who to love, when to love, and most importantly, how to suffer when love doesn't match the prescribed pattern. Power produces subjects. Foucault reminds us, and the romantic subject you've become is not natural or inevitable. It's manufactured. The version of yourself that falls in love, that gets jealous, that feels incomplete without a partner, that measures your worth by your relationship status. That's not the real you. That's the disciplined you, the surveilled you, the you that serves the system's needs. Consider how your romantic behavior changes when you know you're being watched. When you're on a date, you perform a version of yourself that you think is attractive. When you post about your relationship on social media, you curate an image of happiness that may not reflect your reality. When you're single, you perform independence while secretly conforming to narratives about what single people should want. You're always performing for an invisible audience, always modifying your behavior based on an internalized sense of being watched. This performance isn't just exhausting, it's alienating. You become estranged from your own desires because you can no longer distinguish between what you actually want and what you've been taught to want. You lose touch with your authentic self because you're so busy being the self that the surveillance system rewards. You become a stranger to your own heart. The most insidious part of this emotional surveillance is that it feels like freedom. You think you're choosing your own adventure, writing your own love story, following your heart, but what you're actually doing is following a predetermined path that's been disguised as personal choice. The maze feels like an open field because you can't see the walls. Foucault understood that modern power is most effective when it's invisible. The finest, most subtle, most invisible form of power is that which we cannot see, he warned us. The power that shapes your romantic life is so invisible that you mistake it for nature, for instinct, for fate. You think you're experiencing authentic emotion when you're actually experiencing manufactured desire. This is why your relationships follow patterns, why you keep attracting the same type of person, why you keep having the same fights, the same disappointments, the same heartbreaks. It's not because you're unlucky in love or because you have bad taste. It's because you're running through a maze, and mazes are designed to lead you in circles. You think you're making progress, but you're just returning to the same dead ends over and over again. The surveillance doesn't just watch you, it shapes you. It creates the very categories through which you understand love and relationships. It teaches you to see some people as potential partners and others as invisible. It trains you to value certain qualities and ignore others. It programs you to experience attraction in specific ways and to interpret rejection according to predetermined scripts. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. The surveillance doesn't just control who you love, it controls how you love. It shapes the very texture of your romantic experience, the way you express affection, the way you handle conflict, the way you navigate intimacy. All of this has been molded by forces outside your consciousness. You think you're being authentic when you're actually being compliant. The individual is an effect of power, Foucault declared, and the individual you become in relationships is not your natural self. It's the effect of years of emotional surveillance, behavioral modification, and psychological manipulation. The person you are when you're in love is a construct, a fabrication, a product of the system that benefits from your romantic confusion. This realization is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it means your romantic failures aren't personal failures, they're systemic failures. Terrifying because it means everything you thought you knew about love might be wrong. Everything you thought you wanted might be programmed. Everyone you thought you chose might have been chosen for you. The question now becomes, how do you escape a maze when you can't see the walls? How do you reclaim your authentic desires when you're not sure what authenticity means anymore? How do you love freely when freedom might itself be an illusion? Foucault didn't offer easy answers because there aren't any, but he did offer something more valuable: awareness. Knowledge is not for knowing, knowledge is for cutting, he said. The knowledge of your own surveillance is the knife that can cut through the illusions that bind you. Understanding how your desires have been shaped is the first step toward reshaping them. The path forward isn't about finding the right person or the perfect relationship. It's about questioning every assumption you have about love, desire, and partnership. It's about recognizing that your romantic preferences might not be preferences at all, but programming. It's about learning to distinguish between what you actually want and what you've been taught to want. This isn't just an intellectual exercise. This is a matter of existential survival. Because as long as you remain unconscious of the surveillance, you remain trapped in the maze. You'll keep running the same patterns, making the same mistakes, experiencing the same disappointments, wondering why love feels so difficult when it's supposed to be natural. The surveillance system wants you to believe that love is mysterious, unpredictable, beyond your control. It wants you to think that attraction is chemistry, that compatibility is fate, that relationships are either meant to be or not. This mystification serves the system's purposes because it keeps you passive, keeps you consuming, keeps you producing. Data keeps you trapped in cycles of desire and disappointment that generate enormous profits for others. But love isn't mysterious. It's manufactured. Romance isn't fate. It's programming. Your heart isn't following its own rhythm. It's dancing to a beat that's been composed by others, for others, to serve purposes that have nothing to do with your happiness or fulfillment. The people who control the emotional surveillance system, the tech companies, the media conglomerates, the advertising agencies, they don't want you to be happy. They want you to be engaged. They don't want you to find love. They want you to keep looking for it. They don't want you to be satisfied. They want you to be hungry, always consuming, always producing the data that feeds their algorithms and their bank accounts. Your romantic suffering is their success. Your emotional confusion is their clarity. Your relationship problems are their solutions, not because they solve them, but because they profit from them. Every breakup is a new customer. Every heartbreak is a new market opportunity. Every moment of loneliness is a new chance to sell you something that promises to fill the void. This is the most brutal truth about emotional surveillance. It's not designed to help you find love. It's designed to keep you looking for love in ways that serve the system's interests. It's designed to make you dependent on external validation, external platforms, external solutions to internal problems. It's designed to keep you alienated from your own desires, so that you'll keep consuming other people's versions of what desire should look like. But here's what the controllers of this system don't want you to know. You have power, not the kind of power they wield. The power to manipulate and control, but a different kind of power. The power to withdraw your consent. The power to stop participating in your own surveillance. The power to step outside the maze and see it for what it really is. This power begins with refusal. Refusing to accept that your romantic patterns are natural or inevitable. Refusing to believe that your desires are entirely your own. Refusing to participate in the performance of love that social media demands. Refusing to let algorithms dictate your preferences. Refusing to let surveillance masquerade as service. But refusal alone isn't enough. You also need to cultivate new practices, new ways of relating that aren't mediated by the surveillance apparatus. This means learning to pay attention to your own body, your own feelings, your own authentic responses, without immediately translating them into the categories that the system provides. It means learning to love in ways that can't be quantified, measured, or sold. It means developing what Foucault called technologies of the self, practices that allow you to shape your own subjectivity rather than having it shaped for you. This might mean meditation, journaling, therapy, art, or any practice that helps you reconnect with your own authentic desires and feelings. It might mean spending time alone, away from the constant input of media and social pressure, learning to hear your own voice again. Most importantly, it means recognizing that love is not a consumer product. It's not something you can optimize, hack, or perfect through the right techniques or apps or strategies. Love is a practice, a way of being, a commitment to seeing and being seen by another person without the mediating influence of surveillance capitalism. The emotional surveillance system thrives on your isolation and confusion. It wants you to believe that your romantic struggles are personal failures rather than systemic problems. It wants you to think that the solution to loneliness is more consumption, more engagement with platforms designed to exploit your vulnerability. But the real solution is connection. Not the kind of connection that can be measured in likes and swipes, but the kind that happens when two people recognize each other's humanity beneath the layers of conditioning and performance. This kind of connection is threatening to the surveillance system because it doesn't produce data, it doesn't generate profits, and it doesn't require external mediation. This is why the system works so hard to make authentic connection seem impossible or naive. It floods you with stories about how complicated modern love is, how difficult it is to find someone compatible, how many options you have to consider. It overwhelms you with choice to prevent you from making any choice at all. It makes you so anxious about finding the perfect person that you forget how to be present with any person. The maze you're running through isn't just external, it's been internalized. It lives in your mind, in your expectations, in your fears, and hopes about love. You carry the surveillance system with you wherever you go because you've learned to surveil yourself. You've learned to monitor your own romantic performance, to judge your own desirability, to measure your own worth according to relationship status. Breaking free from this internal maze requires more than just deleting dating apps or avoiding social media. It requires a fundamental shift in how you understand yourself and your desires. It requires recognizing that the version of yourself that desperately seeks romantic validation is not your essential self. It's your surveilled self, your disciplined self, your domesticated self, your essential self, the self that exists beneath the layers of conditioning, may have very different desires than the ones you've been taught to have. It may be attracted to different types of people, may want different kinds of relationships, may have different definitions of love and intimacy. But you'll never know what those authentic desires are as long as you remain trapped in the maze of emotional surveillance. The journey toward authentic love begins with the recognition that you've been living in a maze. It continues with the patient work of mapping that maze, understanding how it operates and finding the exit. But it culminates in the radical act of choosing to love yourself and others in ways that can't be surveilled, quantified, or sold. This is your choice. This is your moment. You can continue running through the maze, following the patterns that have been programmed into you, hoping that the next swipe or the next date or the next relationship will finally give you what you're looking for. Or you can stop running, look around, and begin the difficult but essential work of finding your way out. The controllers of the emotional surveillance system are counting on you to choose the maze. They're counting on your fear, your loneliness, your desire for connection to keep you trapped in cycles of consumption and performance. They're counting on you to believe that the maze is reality, that there's no exit, that your only choice is which path to take next. But you do have a choice. You can choose to see the maze for what it is. You can choose to step outside the patterns that have been imposed on you. You can choose to love in ways that honor your authentic self rather than your surveilled self. You can choose freedom over safety, authenticity over performance, presence over productivity. The path out of the maze isn't easy. It requires courage, patience, and a willingness to feel uncomfortable, as you learn to distinguish between your authentic desires and your programmed responses. It requires the strength to disappoint others who have invested in your continued imprisonment. It requires the wisdom to know that love without freedom isn't love at all. It's just another form of control. But the alternative, remaining trapped in the maze, continuing to run the same patterns, accepting that you're romantic. Life will always be mediated by forces beyond your control. That's not really living. That's just surviving in a way that serves other people's interests. So I ask you, are you ready to stop being a rat in their maze? Are you ready to reclaim your authentic desires? Are you ready to love in ways that can't be surveilled, sold, or systematized? The choice is yours, but the time to choose is now. Because every moment you delay is another moment of data they collect. Another moment of conditioning they impose, another moment of your authentic self slipping further away. The maze is real, but so is the possibility of escape. The surveillance is powerful, but so is your capacity for authentic connection. The system wants you to remain trapped, but you have the power to choose freedom. The question is, what will you choose?